Eureka! The apple falls, and everything else does too. It is the law of gravity.
What happens when the world stops taking "because I said so" for an answer? What if I told you that in 1 century, Europeans went from believing the Earth was the center of the universe to believing that they had the right to overthrow their kings, and all because of reason? Get ready, because today we're tackling the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, the ideas that shattered tradition and built the modern world. Coming up next on the 50th episode of AP History Help, we're covering Unit 4 of AP European History. Greetings, history students. Welcome back to the AP History Help podcast, your guide to making sense of the past. I am your host, Wendy, and today's a very special day.
Congratulations on the 50th episode.
Woo, woo, woo. This is episode 50 of the podcast. Can you believe it? 50 episodes of skills, content, deep dives, and hopefully helping you to conquer your AP history classes. I just want to say a huge, massive thank you to every single one of you who have listened, who follow me, who send messages, and who support this podcast. It really, truly, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, it means the world to me, and I wouldn't be here without you. As a gift, all I want is to keep growing this audience. Tell a friend, tell a teacher. If you are a teacher, tell your students, tell your colleagues. You know, way back in the first season, I used to answer questions from listeners. What do you think? Should I start doing that again? Let me know, or just comment on an episode wherever you watch or listen, and maybe I will include it in our next episode. Come on in, students. Grab your notes. We're celebrating our 50th episode by tackling one of the most important units in all of European history. Today, we're diving into AP European History Unit 4, Scientific, Philosophical, and Political Developments. This is the unit that changes everything. It's the bridge from the old world of kings and religious teaching to the modern world of science, democracy, and individual rights. This is the era where Europeans start questioning everything. Hold on tight as we unlock the age of reason.
If the right to govern is not divine, by what authority do kings rule?
Reason must prevail over dogma.
So, how did it all start? It doesn't start with politics. It starts with the stars. For centuries, the official European worldview, backed by the church, was geocentric. Everything, the sun, the planets, revolved around the earth. Geo meaning earth, centric meaning at the center. It was neat, it was tidy, and it put humanity at the center of God's plan. But then a few brave thinkers started, looking up. Nicholas Copernicus, a Polish astronomer, proposed a heliocentric model, that the Earth actually revolved around the sun. Helio meaning sun, centric meaning center. This was revolutionary and it was dangerous. Then Galileo used a telescope to prove it, as well as he observed the moons of Jupiter, and he saw things that directly contradicted the church teachings. And he was famously put on trial and forced to recant what he said, but only because he didn't want to go to jail. He didn't really think that when he was recanting that he meant what he was saying. I shall digress. And the genie was out of the bottle. Like, this new way of thinking was based on empiricism. It's an important word, empiricism. The idea that you should base your conclusions on observation and evidence and not just on faith or what Aristotle said 1,000 years ago. The superstar who really ties this all together, though, is Sir Isaac Newton. I mean, he's on our thumbnail this week. So Newton's big idea was universal gravitation. He argued that the same logical physical laws that govern both a falling apple on Earth and the movement of the planets in the sky, it was the same, right? He argued that the same logical physical laws governed both a falling apple on Earth and the movement of the planets in the sky. Yeah, I repeated that. There was a reason. It's important. This was mind-blowing. It meant the universe wasn't some chaotic, mysterious place run by miracles. It was an orderly, rational, predictable machine. A machine that God may have created, but one that humans could understand through reason and math. Now, the scientific revolution is causation at its finest. The effect of proving that the universe is rational and understandable, well, thinkers, who we call philosophers, started asking a radical question. If the universe follows natural laws, why doesn't our society? This is the Enlightenment. It's taking the scientific method and applying it to government, religion, and human rights. And oh boy, did that get messy. By the way, I did a deep dive on the Enlightenment as a topic a few episodes ago, episode 47. I talked about how it applies to all 3 AP history courses. It's a favorite topic of mine, so if you have not heard it, you should definitely go back a few episodes and check that one out. So let's meet some of the superstars of the Enlightenment. You must know these names. John Locke. No, not the same John Locke from the TV show Lost, but I have theories as to why they named him that. Anyway, John Locke, the Enlightenment thinker. We've talked about him before. He is the English thinker who argued for natural rights. He said that all people are born with the right to life and liberty and property. He argued that government's only job is to protect those rights. And if it fails or tries to take them away, that the people have the right to overthrow it. This is the social contract, and it is the direct intellectual bomb that fuels the American and the French revolutions. Voltaire was a French philosopher. He was the king of snark. He was rather snarky. He championed religious toleration and the freedom of speech. He famously used wit to mock the Catholic Church and the French monarchy for their corruption and their intolerance. I mentioned Voltaire once before because as a champion of freedom of speech, he didn't really say, but it was in his biography that he believed that he may not agree with what you have to say, but he would defend till his death your right to say it. He also famously said that God was like a clockmaker, that the clockmaker spends a lot of time making the clock, and this is back in the olden days. Clocks had a lot of moving pieces that all have to fit perfectly together in order to work. But once it's done, it's like set in motion and it's good to go. And that's how he felt God created the earth, that he spent a lot of time on the details, but once it was done, set it in motion and pretty much like walked away like, hey, you're on your own. Anyway, so he's a rather interesting man with some pretty fascinating ideas. Montesquieu, his big idea was the separation of powers. He looked at the British government, which, as we discussed in Unit 3, was a constitutional monarchy. And he argued that power should be split between different branches, like a king, executive, parliament, legislative, and courts, judicial, to prevent any one person or group from becoming a tyrant. Sound familiar, APUSH students? Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he was a little bit of a radical. He also believed in social contract, but his ideas were different from those of Locke's. He argued that the general will of the people was the ultimate authority, and he believed that society itself had corrupted natural man and was deeply critical of the inequality that he saw. And how did these dangerous ideas spread? They spread in new urban social spaces. They were discussed in salons, intellectual house parties, often hosted by wealthy women, which is a key role for women in this era, and in coffee houses, which were the new buzzing centers of public debate. Which brings us to our fun fact time. You just heard me mention coffee houses. Well, for our 50th episode fun fact, let's talk about those. In the 18th century, coffee was the new hot, trendy drink. It was the energy drink of the Enlightenment, and coffee houses popped up all over London, Paris, and Vienna. They were nicknamed penny universities because for the price of a cup of coffee, 1 penny, you could sit all day, read the latest newspapers, and debate politics and philosophy with brilliant minds. But they weren't quiet, cozy libraries like a modern day Starbucks. They were loud, filled with tobacco smoke, and fueled by caffeine and intellectual fervor. Debates got so heated that rivals would sometimes challenge each other to duels right there in the coffee house. In fact, King Charles II of England actually tried to ban coffee houses in 1675. He put out a proclamation to shut them all down, not because he hated coffee, but because he was correctly terrified that these were hotbeds of political sedition, where people were plotting against him. The public outcry was so immense that he had to retract the ban 2 days later. That's the power of coffee and free speech. Did you know that I'm a huge proponent of free speech and that I love coffee? Thus, I love that fun fact. It's right down my alley. And did you know that you could buy me a cup of coffee? Oh, God, my regular listeners, you had to know that was coming. You could buy me a virtual cup of coffee. Well, I mean, if you're ever in the Tampa Bay area, or if I happen to meet you in my travels, you could buy me a physical cup of coffee and we could sit down and we could chat like we're in a coffee house and talk ideas. But if that's not possible, Buy Me a Coffee makes it super easy. You just go to buymeacoffee.com/APHistoryHelp and you click on that button to buy me a coffee. And I'll be sure to have a cup and thank you when I record the next episode, if that's okay with you. If not, I won't read your name. You can do this anonymously or get the credit for it. Or you could buy me a cup of coffee and ask me a question and we could drink coffee and talk about your question. And as you know, I would be ever so grateful for that. All right, for the rest of the episode. So you've got these radical ideas of freedom and rights spreading everywhere. And then you have the absolute monarchs that we talked about in Unit 3. Now, what happens when these two things collide? You get one of the weirdest and most tested concepts in AP Euro, Enlightened Absolutism. Now, the idea is that some monarchs, started to adopt Enlightenment ideas. They didn't give up their power. No. Instead, they tried to use that absolute power to rationally and efficiently reform their countries from the top down. Their motto was basically everything for the people, nothing by the people. So we're going to look at the big three enlightened absolutist monarchs, starting with Frederick the Great of Prussia. He called himself the first servant of the state, and he invited Voltaire to hang out and promoted religious toleration and reformed the legal code in Prussia. But he also expanded his army, fought aggressive wars, and did not end serfdom. He kept the powerful nobles, known as the Junkers, on his side. Catherine the Great, she wrote letters to the philosophes and talked a lot about reform. But when a massive peasant revolt called Pugachev's Rebellion challenged her, she crushed it brutally and actually strengthened serfdom, giving nobles more power over their serfs. And third is Joseph II of Austria. He was probably the most truly enlightened of the three. He was radical. He abolished serfdom, mandated religious toleration for everyone, and he tried to equalize the justice system. The problem? He did it all too fast, and everyone hated him for it. Too much change too fast. The nobles, the church, even the peasants who were very confused by all these reforms, they all resisted. And his reforms were mostly repealed after his death. So were these rulers truly enlightened? That is a great continuity and change question, by the way. The change was their use of rational language and some religious legal reforms. The continuity? They were still absolutists, focused on strengthening their own military and state power. Finally, while all this big brain thinking was happening, life for the average European was also changing, just much more slowly. The agricultural revolution was gaining steam with new technologies like crop rotation and new crops like the potato, leading to more food. And more means a population boom. Europe's population exploded in the 18th century. Many of these new people couldn't find work on farms thanks to the enclosure movement in England. So they turned to the cottage industry or proto-industrialization. This is where entrepreneurs would drop off raw wool or cotton at a peasant's cottage, and the whole family would spin and weave it into cloth, getting paid by the piece. It was a new way of organizing labor that laid the groundwork for the factories of the Industrial Revolution, which is coming up in Unit 6. Hold your horses. Let's not get too far ahead. It's all connected, you guys. You've heard me say that before. And that, my friends, is a wrap on Unit 4. As you can see, it's all about ideas. The scientific revolution gave us a new method known as reason. The Enlightenment applied that reason to society, creating radical new ideas about rights and government. And enlightened absolutists tried to co-opt those ideas to strengthen their own rule. These ideas are the intellectual fuel for the massive, fiery explosion that comes next. Join me next time when we dive into the isms, the words that end with ISM. It's a lot of vocabulary, but I'll be putting those isms into context, explaining what they are, when they started, and how they've played out in history. And then 2 episodes ahead, on episode 52, we will jump into the crazy, amazing, terrifying time of AP Euro Unit 5, the French Revolution and Napoleon. Thank you so much, again, for being part of this 50-episode journey Here's to another 50 more. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen, and follow me on social media for more resources. I am always here to help you. And with that, this episode of the AP History Help podcast is now history.